Hello, dear viewers. This story was sent to me by a man from Texas. He's 54 years old, has 4 children, and recently discovered that all his kids are from different men. Today, I'll share his story, a tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and shocking revelations. Be sure to like, subscribe, and let's dive in. My name is Roy Hart. I'm 54 years old, and I live in a small town called Brownwood, Texas. My wife Emma and I have 4 kids: Clara, 18, Jack, 15, Sophie, 12, and little Michael, 7. For 20 years, I thought we were the perfect family. We lived in an old ranch house with a white picket fence I painted every summer, and a big oak tree in the yard where the kids swung on a tire swing. I worked at the warehouse, Emma took care of the house, and every evening we'd gather for dinner, laughing and sharing stories. But on a scorching July day, when the sun was so hot it melted the asphalt, my entire world collapsed. I came home early that day. Work at the warehouse was slow. A delivery truck got delayed, so I decided to head out sooner than usual. I had an idea. I'd surprise Emma with flowers, like I used to when we were dating. We'd been married for 20 years, and I always tried to be a good husband. I stopped by the flower shop on the corner, picked up a bouquet of yellow roses, her favorite, and drove home with a smile on my face. The house was eerily quiet when I walked in. Normally, the kids would be making a racket. Clara on the phone with her friends, Jack shooting hoops in the driveway, Sophie drawing at the table, Michael racing around with his toy cars. But today, Clara was at a friend's house. Jack was at basketball practice, and Sophie and Michael were at summer camp. Emma should have been home. I called out for her, standing in the hallway, but there was no answer. On the kitchen table, amidst toast crumbs and an empty lemonade can, sat Emma's laptop, open, the screen glowing. I wasn't planning to snoop. I'd never been the type to go through her things. But something about the silence, the emptiness of the house, drew me closer. On the screen was an email tab, and I saw a message from someone named Jake. The subject line read, "Thanks for last night, baby. When's he leaving again?" My heart stopped. I clicked on the email, and each word hit me like a sledgehammer. "You were so passionate, Emma. I can't wait to see you again. He doesn't suspect a thing, right?" I scrolled through more emails. Dozens, hundreds. Names I didn't recognize. Jake, Eric, Trevor, Dan. Messages about meetups, intimate details, promises to see each other soon. I collapsed onto a chair, the bouquet slipping from my hands, petals scattering across the floor. My mind raced back to how we met. It was 22 years ago, at a roadside diner off Highway 183. I was a truck driver, she was a waitress with a radiant smile. I spilled coffee on the table, she laughed, and I was done for. We got married a year later, had Clara the year after that. I thought she was mine forever. But now, staring at these emails, I realized the Emma I loved was an illusion. She wasn't just cheating. She was living a double life, right under my nose. I remembered how she'd often visit her sister in Dallas, how she'd come home late, how she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. All these years, I'd been blind. I sat in silence, listening to the clock tick on the wall, trying to grasp how long this had been going on. How many men? How many lies? And the worst fear of all, what about the kids? I looked at their photos hanging above the fireplace. Clara with her chestnut hair, Jack with his freckles, Sophie with her green eyes, Michael with his dimples. They were my everything. But now I was terrified of what I might find out. I sat at the kitchen table, Emma's laptop in front of me, each new email cutting deeper. Men wrote about rendezvous in cheap motels off the highway, in our barn behind the house, even in our car, the same one I used to drive the kids to school. Emma responded with a tenderness I hadn't seen from her in years. "You make me feel alive," she wrote to Trevor. "Can't wait to see you again," she promised Eric. I remembered how she'd often go to her sister's in Dallas. I never checked because I trusted her. Now I realized there was no sister. She'd take weekends away, leaving me with the kids, and go off to her lovers. Sometimes she'd come back with a new haircut or manicure, and I, the fool, thought she did it for me. One email hit me particularly hard. "Clara looks so much like me, doesn't she?" wrote Eric. Clara, my eldest, my pride. She's 18, about to go to college. I always thought she inherited my brown eyes, but now I looked at her photo on the wall and saw someone else's features. Cheekbones that weren't mine, a smile that belonged to a stranger. I dug deeper. In Emma's cloud storage, I found a folder of photos. In one, she was with a man in a motel. I recognized the sign. We'd passed it on our way to San Antonio. In another, she was hugging a different guy in our barn on Jack's birthday when I was working a night shift. I'd called her that night to say I'd be late, and she'd said, "Don't worry, honey. I've got it under control." She did, but not the way I thought. I remembered that birthday. I came home at dawn, exhausted but happy. The kids were asleep, and Emma greeted me with a smile, wearing a new dress I complimented. Now I knew who she'd worn it for. I scrolled further and found a video. Emma had recorded it on her phone, laughing in an unfamiliar room. "Roy will never find out," she said to the camera, and a man's voice laughed in the background. I shut it off, unable to watch. My mind was a mess. I thought of how Emma was always too tired for me, how she'd brush me off when I suggested a date night. I thought it was because of the kids, the daily grind. Now I saw the truth. She was giving her love to others. I stood and walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. Our home, which we bought after Clara was born, was full of memories. Here in the living room, we celebrated Jack's first birthday, dressing him up as a cowboy. Here in the kitchen, Sophie learned to bake cookies, smearing flour on her face. Here in the bedroom, I held Michael for the first time when Emma gave birth at Brownwood Hospital. Those moments were sacred to me, but to Emma, they meant nothing. I went back to the laptop and found another email from a man named Dan. "Sophie's my spitting image," he wrote. Sophie, my green-eyed girl who loved horses and dreamed of being a vet. I closed the laptop, unable to read more. I needed to know the truth about the kids, but I was terrified of what I'd find. I couldn't live in ignorance anymore. I needed to know if the kids were mine. I ordered DNA test kits online, swabs that promised answers. While Emma was out on another errand, I now knew it was a lie, I collected samples. Hair from Clara's brush, Jack's toothbrush, a cup Sophie drank from, and Michael's stuffed toy he hugged at night. I sent the samples to the lab, but the wait was torture. Every day I looked at the kids, searching for signs they weren't mine. Clara with her chestnut hair. Did she really look like me? Jack, with his freckles and wide smile. I'd always thought he got that from my mom, but now I wasn't sure. Sophie, with her green eyes I'd called a miracle of nature. Now I saw Dan in them. And Michael, my baby with his dimples. Was he mine? Emma acted like nothing was wrong. She made dinner, fried chicken and mashed potatoes, our family favorite. She laughed with the kids, helped Sophie with homework, sang Michael a lullaby. Once she even tried to hug me when I got home from work, but I pulled away. Her touch felt like poison. "What's wrong, Roy?" she asked, frowning. "You're so distant." "Just tired," I lied, avoiding her gaze. She shrugged and went to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't look at her without imagining her with other men, whispering words she should have saved for me. The test results arrived a week later. I didn't want to open the envelope at home where Emma might see, so I drove to the river where we used to fish with the kids. I parked my truck on the side, listening to the water ripple, and opened the letter. Clara, not mine. Biological father, Eric Johnson, 98% match. Jack, not mine. Father, Trevor Mills. Sophie, not mine. Father, Daniel Crow. Michael, not mine. Father, Jacob Wilson. All 4 from different men. I cried for the first time in 30 years. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the steering wheel. The kids I'd raised, loved, carried on my shoulders, they weren't mine. I thought of teaching Clara to ride a bike, building a pillow fort with Jack, reading fairy tales to Sophie, singing to Michael to help him sleep. It was all a lie. Emma had stolen not just my marriage, but my family. I sat in the truck, watching the sunset, wondering what to do next. I couldn't just walk away. The kids were my life, even if biology said otherwise. But I couldn't live with Emma anymore. I needed to confront her, but first, I wanted to hear from the kids. I decided to start with Clara. She was the oldest, and I hoped she might know something. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink. In the distance, cows mooed, and the air smelled of fresh-cut grass. "Clara, sweetheart," I began, keeping my voice steady. "Have you ever seen Mom with other men?" She looked at me, her brown eyes widening. "Dad, She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I saw her kissing some guy in the barn once. I was 10. She said it was her brother, but I knew Mom didn't have any brothers." Her words hit me like lightning. Emma had used even the kids to cover her tracks. I remembered that year. I'd taken extra shifts and was often gone on weekends. Emma stayed with the kids, and I thought everything was fine. But now I saw she'd brought men into our home, our barn, right under Clara's nose. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, a lump rising in my throat. "I was scared, Dad," she whispered. "Mom said it was our secret, and that you'd be upset. I didn't want you to leave." I hugged her, pulling her close. Clara had always been my girl, even if DNA said otherwise. "I'm not going anywhere, baby," I said, stroking her hair. But inside I was seething. Emma hadn't just betrayed me. She'd forced my daughter to carry this burden. We sat in silence, watching the stars appear in the sky. I remembered how Clara used to love counting stars, lying on a blanket in the yard. She'd always been so curious, so gentle. Now I realized how much pain she'd been hiding all these years. "Do you know who he was?" I asked, hoping for a lead. "No," she shook her head, "but I saw him again a couple of years ago. He came by in a black pickup, and Mom left with him, saying she was going to the store." A black pickup. I remembered seeing one parked near our house once, but Emma said it was a neighbor borrowing tools. How many times had she lied to my face? I thanked Clara and asked her not to tell anyone about our talk. I needed more evidence before confronting Emma, but Clara's words confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Emma had been living a double life, and I'd been too blind to see it. Clara's mention of the barn haunted me. The next day, while Emma was out on another errand, I went to investigate. The barn stood behind the house, weathered by time, its red paint peeling off the walls. I'd spent countless hours there, fixing the tractor, teaching Jack how to hammer nails, storing old tools. But now I looked at it with new eyes. Inside it smelled of hay, gasoline, and dust. I started digging through old boxes under the workbench. In one, hidden behind rusty paint cans, I found what I was looking for. Letters tied with a rubber band, photos, motel receipts, even a pair of men's socks. The letters were from different men. One, from Trevor, read, "Emma, you sure he doesn't know?" Jack looks so much like me. Jack, my boy who loved basketball and dreamed of being a firefighter. I clenched the letter, rage boiling inside me. The photos showed Emma with these men. In one, she was laughing, sitting on a guy's lap in a bar. In another, they were hugging on a beach. I recognized the spot. We'd gone there as a family 2 years ago. I'd worked overtime to pay for that trip, and Emma had apparently found time for someone else. I found a note with a phone number and the name Dan. That was Sophie's father, according to the DNA test. I remembered Sophie asking why she had green eyes when both Emma and I had brown. Emma had laughed it off, saying, "That's just genetics." Now I knew the truth. The barn, my sanctuary, the place where I'd taught the kids to build things, had become the stage for her affairs. I recalled finding an empty whiskey bottle in the barn once, though I don't drink. Emma said a neighbor must have left it. How many times had I accepted her lies? I sat on the floor, holding the evidence, thinking about how Emma had turned our life into a charade. She didn't just cheat, she'd built a web of deceit, pulling us all into it. I knew it was time to confront her, but I needed to be ready. I waited until the kids were out of the house. Clara gave me a worried look, but said nothing. Jack rushed off to practice. Sophie and Michael were at camp. The house was empty again, just me and Emma. I called her into the living room. On the table were the letters, photos, DNA test results, motel receipts. I looked at her, searching for a trace of the woman I loved, but saw only a stranger. "Explain," I said, my voice trembling with anger. She paled, her hands shaking. "Roy, It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I shouted, slamming my fist on the table. "I have 4 kids, and not one of them is mine. You've been sleeping with half of Texas, Emma. You brought them into our home, our barn, our car." She burst into tears, but I could tell they weren't genuine. They were the tears of someone caught. "I loved you, Roy, but I was bored," she said, wiping her eyes. "You were always at work, always busy. I wanted to live, to feel desired." Her words cut like a knife. I'd given her everything, a home, a family, my love. I worked 12-hour shifts to keep a roof over our heads, to send the kids to good schools, to give Emma everything she wanted. And she was bored. "Bored," I repeated, anger giving way to pain. "You had kids, Emma. You had a family, and you chose motels and strangers' beds." She lowered her head, silent. I pointed to the door. "Get out. I don't want to see you again." Emma tried to speak, but I didn't listen. I packed her things into a suitcase, dresses, makeup, the jewelry I'd given her, and pushed her out the door. She stood on the porch crying, but I didn't care. She'd destroyed my life, and I wasn't going to forgive her. The divorce was brutal. Emma hired a lawyer, trying to take the house, claiming I'd driven her to cheat, that I was cold and distant. But the judge saw the evidence, the letters, photos, test results. He asked Emma to explain, and she couldn't. I kept the house, but I lost the family I thought I had. The kids stayed with me. I told them the truth, and it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. Clara sat silently, holding my hand. Jack locked himself in his room until morning. Sophie cried, asking why Mom did this. Michael just hugged me and said, "You're my dad." Clara cut off contact with Emma. Jack said he hated her. Sophie and Michael were too young to fully understand, but I knew it would leave a scar. I tried to be strong for them, but at night, when they were asleep, I'd sit in the kitchen with a beer, trying to figure out how to move forward. I saw Emma one last time in court. She looked older, her eyes hollow, her skin pale. She'd lost everything, her family, her home, the kids' respect. But I felt no satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness. I thought back to the dreams we'd shared. We wanted to buy a plot by the lake, build a cabin where the kids could play, where we'd grow old together. Now those dreams were dead. I was left alone, with 4 kids who weren't mine by blood, but who I loved more than anything. I decided to track down the kids' biological fathers. Not for Emma, but for the kids. They deserved to know the truth, even if it hurt. I started with Eric, Clara's father. Using the DNA test info, I found him on social media. He was a 42-year-old bartender in Austin, divorced. I messaged him, explaining the situation. He replied a week later, "Sorry, man, but I'm not ready to be a dad. I've got my own life." Clara, when she heard, shrugged. "You're my dad. I don't need another," she said. Trevor, Jack's father, was a truck driver. I tracked him down through his company. We met at a diner off the highway. He was a big guy, arms covered in tattoos. "I didn't know Emma was married," he said, looking away. "I don't want trouble." Jack refused to meet him. Sophie's father, Dan, was a mechanic in a nearby town. He was gruff, wiping sweat off his brow with greasy hands when I showed up at his garage. "Emma was just a fling," he said. Sophie cried when she heard. Michael's father, Jake, was a married lawyer from Dallas. He threatened to sue me if I didn't leave him alone. "I have my own family," he wrote. Michael just hugged me and said, "I love you, Dad." None of these men wanted responsibility. They'd used Emma and walked away, just like she'd walked away from us. But it brought me closer to the kids. We grew tighter than ever. I realized family isn't about DNA. It's about the love I gave them. A year passed. I sold the ranch. Too many memories, too much pain. The kids and I moved to Austin to a new house with a big yard. I found a new job at a local warehouse. Better hours, better pay. We started fresh. New home, new school, new friends. I spent more time with the kids. I taught Michael to play baseball, helped Sophie with her science projects, cheered Jack on at his games, and listened to Clara talk about college. Sometimes I missed Emma, not the woman who cheated, but the one I loved 20 years ago. But I knew that Emma was gone. We built new traditions, Friday movie nights, Sunday barbecues, trips to the lake. The kids started smiling again, and so did I. I realized I was enough for them, and they were enough for me. I learned that love can blind you, but the truth always comes out. Emma stole 20 years from me, but she couldn't take my family. The kids are mine because I raised them, loved them, fought for them. Now I live for them. I'm their dad, and that's all that matters. Maybe one day I'll open my heart again, but for now I'm just a father, doing my best to make my kids happy. That's the story, folks. What would you do in Roy's shoes? Let me know in the comments, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.